Sometimes when we run these events, because Vicky and I have been running our PM Summit for the last 6 years, people always come up to us and ask us, why did you have that keynote? They've nothing to do with project management whatsoever. And not that they complain about the keynote because they find it very inspirational. And my attitude always has been, I'm not someone who believes in there's one way to do project management. But the main thing about project management is it's about people. So everybody has something to learn from someone else around the project. And the definition of a project is up behind us there about this temporary endeavor and providing a product or a service or whatever. But the impermanence of life is one of the biggest projects we'll ever live through. The only one we bring on time is the birth one, except if you're like me, I came about 6 weeks too early. But if you could just give us a bit of background as to who is Vicky Phelan, without getting, giving anything away you don't want to, but sure, it's all in your book anyway.
Yeah. Well, there's no holds barred with me, I had a few run-ins with my publisher actually about some things that they wanted to tone down, and I just thought, no, I'm not going to be toned down at this stage in my life, because I think that's what people appreciate, is that I'm honest. One of the big things that came out in my book, actually, we left it till last, was about my marriage. What people didn't know about me, I suppose, was that, all people saw last year was that I had a court case that I took on the state. I had been misdiagnosed, and I had a feeling. I suppose one of the things people ask me is, how did you know? And I think that's where, women, I think you have an innate, I think it's something women are very good at. I just knew something was wrong. I had a gut feeling. Yeah, I had been diagnosed with cancer in 2014, and when I finished all my treatment and I had a scan at the beginning of 2015, they told me everything was clear. But I think, I don't know, as a woman, I think we know our bodies really well. And that's something I really like to kind of focus on over the last year and a half, since I've gotten this platform. Because I think as women, we're very bad at doing that. I've been very good at doing it. I've never been afraid of people not liking me or doctors not liking me. They haven't liked me all my life, to be honest. I've always been seen as the difficult patient or the difficult mother because I have a child with a medical condition. But I really don't care, because I think, when you're, especially when you have a child with needs, you'll do, I'm sure there's plenty of women in this room who know exactly what I'm talking about here. You'll do whatever it takes for your child. But we're not very good at doing that for our children. Or for ourselves, sorry. We'll do it for our children, but we won't do it for ourselves. We're very bad at kind of putting ourselves forward or actually kind of advocating for ourselves. And it was only when I was, my cancer came back the second time. First time round, I kind of did what I was told. I went through my treatment, and I had my scan that showed that it was all clear in 2015. But in the intervening 2 years before it came back, I just knew something wasn't right. I had this kind of constant pain in my back, and they kept saying to me, oh, it's just post-radiation effects, it couldn't be back. But I didn't ask for a scan because, again, I believed them, thought, they know what they're doing. But when I did actually insist on the scan, found out it was back, and not only was it back, I had a 10-centimetre tumour instead of a 4-centimetre tumour, when I started. So that was when I got angry, and I thought, well, I'm not doing this their way, I'm doing it my way. And I insisted on a biopsy, and I took control of my care, and all they were offering me was palliative chemotherapy, and I said, no, that's not good enough for me. I'm 43, I have 2 small kids. My kids were only what age were they at that stage? 2017. Jesus, imagine 2 years ago.
I know.
12 and 7. They were 12 and 7 at the time, and I just thought, and what really bugged me was my oncologist was a woman, which made it even worse for me. I think if it was a man, I would have found it easier. Sorry now, Raymond, but
just pile it on.
Yeah, just pile it on.
Get it out.
She was younger than me, and she'd just come back from maternity leave, and I said to her, I said, you're telling me to go home, get my affairs in order, all you can offer me is palliative chemotherapy. I have 2 kids, young kids. I said, you've got 3 kids yourself. How can you do that? How can you tell me to go home and basically give up? I said, I just can't understand it. And I just got angry. That was the day I got angry, and I haven't stopped since, really, to be honest. And I just said, no, that's it, enough is enough. And I have to say, since that day, that was really the pivotal moment for me last year, when I just decided that was it, I'm doing things my way, and I've done them my way ever since. And I can't stress enough how important it is to be yourself and stand up for what you believe in. If you think something is wrong, or like today, somebody said to me, you know, are you not nervous going in front of, is that you or me?
It can't be me.
Are you not nervous going into a room filled with people and kind of bearing your soul? And I see I've done it so often in the last year and a half at this stage, it doesn't matter, you know. But I don't get nervous about it because I'm telling the truth. It's helping me, helping other people helps me. And I think if it helps other women to stand up for themselves and to take control of your bodies and your life, it'll make all the difference. And this could, you know, like, you know, the reason Raymond asked me here today is because, you know, yes, you know, what we're talking about, I don't work in project management. I was a manager, by the way, so I do know something about management. But it's transferable. All these skills are transferable. So, I mean, I used a lot of the skills that I would have used as a manager to manage my disease, you know. It's like managing people. It's the same as managing a disease, and you go off and start, you know, making all your plans. You know, I just, you know, took it on board.
Sure.
But, you know, apart from my cancer and the court case that I took last year, I think what's been most beneficial for me over the last year and a half is actually has been talking about all of the side effects of this type of cancer that women don't talk about. We're very bad at talking about the things that happen down here, you know, from here down, we don't talk about it.
Are you like
you know,
men there then?
we all have
We're
babies,
fine.
we all have periods. I mean, we spend half, you know, I've said this before, we spend half of our lives down in this part of our body between periods, having babies, the menopause, you know, and we don't talk about it. It's ridiculous. You know, you're supposed to just go off, pop these babies out and, you know, forget about it afterwards and pretend that, oh, you know, I had a 6-inch tear or a 3-inch tear and sitting on a ball or a ring, not being able to have sex for months or years in some cases, and what you're supposed to just put up with that. You know, so I think we need to start these conversations and normalise these things that, you know, it's not just me. There are other women out there who are going through exactly the same thing. So yeah, I have definitely, I suppose, gotten the best, the most satisfaction I've had over the last 18 months has been talking out about everything that's happened to me.
Yeah, and I think that's something like when you were saying managing people. You see, I've been fortunate enough. I've worked both in the hard projects, where it's large civil engineering projects, down to soft projects, which is implementation and change management and all that type of thing. And there is no difference, although Agile and Waterfall will tell you they're so vastly different. There isn't any difference because the reality is you're dealing with people. And when you're dealing with people, and as a project manager, and you're all project managers, if you can't manage people, you can't manage projects. Don't anyone tell you that you're managing a project. You're not. And I have a theory about that, that when you have, if you only have 5 people on your team, you have 25 people on your team, because they have 5 personalities for every day of the week. And you never know which one is coming into the room on any particular day. And it's important that, you know, we hone those skills, and you're right, women have a much better ability to sort of know something's wrong. Like when I got ill that time, I didn't know anything was wrong. All I knew I was ill.
Yeah.
I didn't have any innate, but Selena knew there was something wrong. I'm glad to say I can also have a C-section as well, because mine was a C. So we're cool there, you know. But you're right, and if you think women are bad talking, and you know, you all have men in your life, whether that's a father, a grandfather, a son, a nephew, a brother, it doesn't matter. There's a man somewhere, just like there's a woman, like you said the other day, a woman in every man's life. And that's one of the things I try to retweet with you on, is that you've got to get them to talk. Because they are the wherever you might think you're bad, but if I tried to talk to guys about, you know, what I went through, they just shut down. And it's like, you know, they want to move on from it. And I mean, when you look at the statistics, which are actually quite startling and frightening, these like, you know, 1 in 4 people in Ireland, there's actually a website called 1 in 4. And basically 1 in 4 people in Ireland have suffered some form of abuse. 1 in 4 women will contact cancer. What a lot of people don't realise is 1 in 3 men will contact cancer. The highest rate of cancer in Ireland is actually the prostate cancer. Next is breast, I think, and I think melanoma or something is first. Yeah. So these statistics that you see behind you, they're statistics that they're the people you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. They're somewhere in the room right now, and we've got to learn to get over that. So we build up resistance. Would you say that through your life? Are you like me?
Yeah.
That's where your layering comes from?
Yeah, I think so. I think all of these things happen in your life, and it's only later, I think, as you know, when you're going through other stuff, that you realise that, you know, a lot of the stuff that's happened to you has built you up to, you know, the resilience has built up over years, and it can either do one of two things, and I've had both. It can either, you know, send you down on a spiral of depression, or some, you know, where you can't deal with things, or you I wouldn't say bounce back, but it gives you more drive to kind of fight on, because you've already dealt with things that have been worse. Like last year, you know, last year when I was re-diagnosed and told it was terminal and had to face into this court case, you know, everyone would assume that that's the worst thing that could happen to you, but for me it wasn't actually. You know, that was not the worst thing that happened to me. The worst thing that happened to me was in 2013. My daughter was very badly burned in an accident at home and spent 6 weeks in hospital, had severe burns, you know, 14% of her body. She had skin graft surgeries, and was in an awful lot of pain for a lot of time. It took months for her to heal, and she's still, you know, seeing therapists. She's 14 now, but that, for me, that was the worst thing that ever happened in my life. I don't think anything can top that, to be honest, and, you know, that had a huge impact on me. But I was very lucky that I worked in an environment with a lot of women, actually, where I work in WIT, who were very supportive and who have seen me through all of those periods, say between being diagnosed with cancer and Amelia's accident. And without those women and that support, and my employer was really good, you know, I took time off. I was lucky. I worked in the public sector, where we do get sick leave and time off, and they were very, very accommodating to me over the periods of my life where things have happened. And I really appreciated that, you know, and I gave 100% whenever I went back to work after all of those periods, because I appreciated the fact that they could see that, you know, I needed the time off. And when I went back, I was very, very you know, I really appreciated that at the time, and I still do. I think, you know, when you have that support behind you, it makes all the difference.
When you've got a network, particularly a close network, and I don't know about you, but, you know, I know we talked about this last night, and you know about it. We've got a little WhatsApp group going between a group of guys, and it's actually the WhatsApp group that carries you through on the bad days. Yeah. Because everyone else sees the smiley face, like you and I'll sit here and we'll be smile face, and that's the whole thing. When you think of something, and it's not just cancer, it's any long-term illness or terminal illness or whatever, it's the mental impact that can have on, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
And it's not just on you, but it's those around you who really sort of, it impacts hugely. I told, I remember when we had met earlier on, I'd mentioned to Vicky that she reminded me of my mum. Now, she's way younger than me, so there's no way Vicky can be my own. I'm a lot older. But, and the reason I wanted to share that with Vicky and tell her that she was like my mum is because my mum had been told so many times she was terminally ill. Like, she was told in her 20s not to get married, she'd be dead. Yeah. She was told not to have a child that would kill her, then she was told not to have a second child. And throughout my whole life, we were told, prepare. Yeah. You know, but I think there's an instinct in some humans that they just fight. Yeah. And, you know, I think that carries us through, you know, and gets us to where we're going. And, like, the things that have like, obviously the stuff that's in the media and the cervical, but I mean, there's so, even when you were younger, you had that horrific road accident. Yeah, that was the first thing, I suppose, that happened that made me realise life is not easy, and you know, life can be shit, to be honest. Yeah. I was 19 and I had a really bad car accident in France. We were on our way home from a nightclub, and there was 5 of us in the car, and a car on the other side of the road, the guy fell asleep and crashed into us. It was a head-on collision. He died, and then in our car, the guy that was driving the car was my boyfriend at the time. He died. My friend who was in the back died. Another one of my friends who was in the back is paralysed from the neck down, and I spent 3 months in hospital, broke 70% of the bones on the left-hand side of my body. So to say now I've had a lot of shit thrown at me is an understatement. But the thing is, I'm still sitting here, and that's the point. The point is, you know, and like, you know, I'm no superwoman. I would hate people to think I am. You know, I'm not. I've gone through really bad periods of depression in my life, like really bad, where I've, you know, shut myself away, did not want to see people. But the thing is, these things either make you or they break you. And I've just been very lucky, I suppose, in my life that I have a really good family, like really good family and friends who kind of brought me out of myself. And
you know, the only way I can describe it is last year was really for me a kind of a watershed moment. There's nothing like being faced with your mortality, to be honest, to kind of make you think, well, you know, I'm going to live every moment I have, particularly while I'm well, you know, and I'm really well at the moment. The drug is working for me. I mean, there's no cure. I'm going to succumb to this disease probably within the next 3 to 5 years. And that's hard, you know, I still have young kids, but, you know, at the end of the day, I kind of, you have to look at the positive and think, you know, there's always new drugs coming on stream. I have backups for everything. You know, if this drug stops working, but I'll have to go to the States for it, and that's a big thing because, you know, my daughter's a teenager, she won't want to move away from her friends. But, you know, I suppose the thing is, what I say to people is life is hard, and I think you have to accept that. And I remember reading this book by Scott Peck. Did anybody ever read that? The Road Less Travelled. It's a really good book. There's a bit of kind of God and spirituality at the end of it, which wouldn't be my thing, but there's a lot of it that I really identified with. In the first page of the book, basically, the first sentence is life is difficult. You know, once you accept that life is difficult, then, you know, everything else that comes after is easier, because I think we all expect that life should be easier, or, you know, you're waiting for, you know, I'm going to be happy when. I've been guilty of this myself, you know, when I have the big house, when I have the 2 children, when I have, you know, the size 10 figure, when I have, you know, the fabulous job, and, you know, be able to tell all my friends that I have all of this. You know, that's shit. It really is, because, do you know what? It doesn't really matter what you have, it's what you do with your life. That's really what matters at the end of the day, and how you feel, you know. And to be honest, you know, if you take one piece of advice from me in my situation, I'm just delighted to be here with my 2 kids and my family, and that's all that matters at the end of the day. Everything else is just stuff, you know.
I agree. It's a strange thing, because when people hear you're terminally ill, and I don't ever meet people as you know that about that term, because I have a lot of friends who are terminally ill, and my mum.
And we joke about it.
And we joke about it all the time. So if anyone you know, we wouldn't be the most politically correct people when Vicky and I are talking to one another. So, but what a lot of people don't realise, sitting in this room, even, they're all terminally ill at some degree or stage or level. They will all. Some people may even die before we'll die.
Yeah.
But yet we live this life to think that it's down the road.
Yeah.
You know, we'll get an extension for that project. We'll look for an extension of time, and we'll live that little bit longer, and we put everything on the back foot. And I think we become sort of engrossed in trying to chase something that isn't real.
Yeah.
Where actually we have everything if we just stopped and looked at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's only when someone tells you your life is under threat that you actually, which is sad really, because that means now you've got to wait till your life to be under threat before you realise how good your life is.
Yeah, no, it's true.
And
I wish somebody had told me that a few years ago, you know.
And like the best diet I've ever found is buy clothes that fit you.
Yeah, honestly.
Or even a little bit bigger, because you look
I had to go in and buy a coat the other day, and it was a size 16, because it wouldn't fit my arse if I didn't, you know, tie up the zip, right? If that had been me 2 years ago, I'd have cried my eyes out. I would have just said, oh my God, there's no way I'm going to buy a size 16. I couldn't care anymore. You know, I just think, you know, it fits, it looks fine, you know, get over it. There's worse things, honestly, I'm telling you. But I was one of those people, you know, and the one thing I do miss since I've had cancer is exercise. Like, I can walk and I can do a bit of swimming, but I used to be a big runner. I ran and ran. It was like Forrest Gump. You know, that was my thing. Running was my thing, to get out of my head, and I really loved it. And it kept me slim, so, you know, I can't do that anymore. So I still look at people running and I have that pang, you know. So if you can run, bloody hell, get out there and run, because I can't, and I really miss it.
And don't stop.
Don't stop, no.
Don't stop. There's a statistic that came across on social media when the World Cup was coming up, actually. And I know you're a big rugby fan like myself, and we won't talk about what happened because we still love them.
Still depressed over that now,
yeah. That's more depressing than any illness we get. But, and it was quite, I think it was all the Rugby World Cup teams got involved in it, and basically they were basically saying for every minute of the game they'll play, somebody will commit suicide. And during a game, 80 people will not be there that were there before the game started. You're trying to hone in on that. And like, one of the things that I try to get across at these events as well, because you're all managing teams of people and unfortunately I've had experience of this where I've had people that I've worked with who they look the happiest, joyous people in the world, and they're the ones that took their lives.
Yeah.
So it's like, we had cancer. People know we had cancer. That's fine. But the thing that comes with that is that whole mental.
Yeah.
And people won't say they have a mental problem. I
No,
don't know
there's
if you
still a
found
stigma.
that going
Yeah,
around.
yeah,
There's a
it
huge
did. I
stigma,
mean, I
isn't
didn't
it?
admit to it for a long time in work. When I started working in WIT, where I work, I was just after having my daughter, so it was 2006, and I had worked in UL, and we moved back home. So I got a job in WIT, and nobody would have known me there, so it was like a new start. But Amelia was only 7 months old when I started working, and Amelia was born with a rare medical condition. I had terrible postnatal depression after she was born, and I remember starting work, and the girls I worked with, we often joke about this now, but they said to me, "My God, Vicky, we thought you were the quietest person when you started working with us. For the first year I barely spoke. I went in, did my job, went home. I just couldn't. I was barely able to function, get out the door, go into work, and go back home again. And it wouldn't be me. I'm like, I'm a talker. So when I started talking, they kind of knew, Jesus, there must have been something, wrong. And I was too embarrassed because I didn't really know these women well enough at that stage to kind of open up and tell them, like, I have depression. And it was funny, one of the older women obviously saw, could see exactly what was wrong, and she kind of had chats with me and said to me, God, would you try acupuncture? And she started talking about kind of other things, and without kind of mentioning depression, because I think she knew wouldn't have been ready for that conversation at the time. So I knew she knew, if you know what I mean. So we played the game for a while, and I tried the acupuncture, and I started running a lot more at lunchtimes during work and that. And I appreciated that, it brought me on. And then when I was ready, I did start talking about it. And as soon as I did, sure, the rest of them said, yeah, well, I had that when I had my child. And I was lucky, all of the people I worked with in my office, they were all older than me, all older women. So they all had these experiences that they could share. And it was great, and I do think that, there's nobody in this room who isn't going to be touched by one of either, depression, cancer, looking after an elderly relative, a child with additional needs. It's going to happen, every one of you. So, you are going to be managing teams who have people in those teams with, you don't know what they're coming into work with every day.
Yeah,
That's it.
And it's, it may not be a mental illness, but it may be an attack on your mental stability. Because we've got to be careful when we say illness as opposed to a passing. Like some people who suffer with medical depression, that's a much different thing to, or going through a bad phase in our life for whatever reason, whether that's illness or, look, and I think guys that I've talked to and that would suffer with it, and that some of them are actually afraid to admit they have it, because if they admit they have it, they feel it will impact on their career path.
Yeah.
So it's a huge.
Well, I think people see it as a sign of weakness. Stupidly you do. I did. I thought, I remember thinking, people would think, what's wrong with her? Do you know what I mean? And you go through all of this in your head, and you think people are going to think and especially when you feel like you should be strong,
Yeah.
And I think women are more guilty of that than men, because you're trying to prove yourself at work. You're trying to get up that career ladder. And I did think that. I thought, if I start admitting that, I can't cope with life, well, then they're not going to give me these promotions, because it's a small pool where I work. I was looking at head of department positions, and I thought, well, if they think there's something wrong with me, they're never going to give me this job. I put in, wrote about one particular day. My husband came home from work. Amelia was only about 3 months old. I was still breastfeeding her, and I was forcing myself to breastfeed her. My mother was killing me and told me, would you just stop and give her a bloody bottle? But of course the doctors were telling me, but try and breastfeed for as long as you can. She's a sick baby, she needs it. And of course I was killing myself trying to breastfeed this child who was sick, and she was crying and crying, and she was really colicky. And this one day I just could not feed her, could not keep her fed, could not stop her crying. And he came home from work, and I was fit to fucking kill her. And I literally, he came in, he put down the keys on the door, and I came out and I just handed them to her. I was like this, and he saw my face, and it was pure rage. And I just said, I have to. He said, where are you going? Poor man, God love him. He said, where are you going? And can you imagine? I mean, I had no bottles at this stage. I was still breastfeeding. He couldn't do anything for this child. And I said, I have to go out. I said, I just have to go. I said, I'll fucking kill her if I don't get out this door.
And I wanted to put that in the book, and I remember my editor saying to me, "Oh, Vicky, I think we need to tone this down." I said, "You're joking me." I said, "This is exactly how I felt. It's in the journal. You've seen it." I said, why would I tone it down? And she said, "Oh, people will judge you." I said, "Fuck them. Sorry now, but I said, the people who will judge me are not the people who I care about. The people I want to read this are people like me, women like me who've had that experience. I didn't kill her at the end of the day. She's still here. She's 14. She's not scarred for life. But that was my reality at the time, and I had to, you have to be true to yourself. And I do think, a lot of women came back to me afterwards and said, "Oh my God, Vicky, I remember feeling like that about my son or my daughter, and I always felt so guilty." And I just think you can't carry that for life. It's a disease, postnatal depression. It's a disease, and the one, it's it's an awful disease because you're torn. You love this child and you hate this child, and it's very hard to understand unless you're in that situation.
Yeah, and I think you're right to put it in the book.
And I didn't get too much judgment, actually,
But it's real, so I mean, there's no point, there's no point in writing a book if you're a factual book if you're not going to write the real stuff.
Yeah.
And I think what happens is we've gotten so used to Instagram filters, and I'm not being disingenuous to anyone out here, so it's just my terminology in my head, the way I see it, but the ever-ready Duracell positivity bunnies who I get positivity, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd want to get it, or I'd be, my life anyway, it just wouldn't get through the day. But the issue that I have is that if you're being bombarded every single day with positivity and you're not feeling positive, you actually feel worse than you did when you got up and got dressed. Because suddenly everything that is wrong is you. It's focused on you. You're not positive, and everyone's bombarding you with positivity. And the fellas are great at it. When I had my thing right, the incontinence was huge when I got my operation. So I was back to wearing the full-size nappies, and my grandson and I, in the morning with our little nappy sack down the stairs, and as I called it, the walk of shame to the bin, But you say that to another guy, and they actually say, "No, I'm beginning to cringe. Can we talk about something else?" And they'll hit you with, "Sure, you'll be grand." So, they get positivity, do positivity. Don't get me wrong, but give a little bit of moment and thought to the people who aren't feeling positive at that point in time. So the way I describe it is, I have an Eeyore who's escaping and me trying to get out. Eeyore is my hero in childhood, because he's the one with the cloud over him.
Yeah.
But he has some brilliant sayings, and he loves red balloons, and I love red balloons too. So Eeyore is my hero. So would you have who would you most look up to?
A person or a cartoon?
We'll do both. I know I didn't ask you this one last night, but I just thought, who would be?
You bloody asked me TV and movies.
I know, but come on.
I wasn't ready for this. God.
Tommy Tiernan doesn't be ready either. I'll have to lose the hair a bit though and wear the cap.
Jesus, I can't think now, to be honest.
Is there anyone out there that you would look at in life and say an individual? Like a lot of people in this room, you said to them in the last, who would you look up to? It'd be yourself, it'd be Laura Brennan, it'd be Emma Vicky Phelan, who just had her first anniversary there a few weeks ago. It'd be those people. But who do the Vicky Phelans and the Laura Brennans and everyone else?
Well, for me, it's normal people.
That's exactly.
Do you know, for me, somebody asked me that actually a couple of weeks ago, and for me it was Stephen Teep. Stephen Teep is another campaigner who's campaigned with me since the cervical check scandal broke. His wife died from cervical cancer in 2017. She was 35. Her two children were 4 and 2 when she died, and he has taken on this whole, his whole thing. The reason he's doing this and campaigning as a single father with 2 small boys is because he said he doesn't want his children, at the age of 10 or 12 or whatever, when they're old enough to understand what kind of is going on, to ask him the question, "Well, what did you do, Dad, when you found out that Mum was misdiagnosed? What did you do?" So and that was exactly what he had in the back of his mind. I want to be able to say to my 2 boys when they grow up, I did everything to find out what happened and why it happened and to fix it. So for me, it's normal people who stand up and do extraordinary things.
But
They would be my heroes.
But isn't that
There's
the
no
thing,
big
though?
people for
Isn't
me.
that the thing?
Yeah.
I mean, and it should be normal people.
Yeah.
And that's my point. People, we're so bombarded with everything that people have friends. Now, I don't, there's plenty of friends that I'm on Twitter that probably never met, but they have so many virtual friends that they've actually don't realise the friends they have next to them. And actually they're ignoring the poor person who is their friend that would be there for them if they had a bad time. And heroes generally, I think anyway, personally in life, my heroes would always be people in my life. Like for me, it's my mother.
Yeah.
It's a no-brainer, I mean, it just is that way. You got a cartoon character you like?
Oh, Jesus.
No pressure.
Do you know what? I love the movie Up. You know that movie, that Disney? I love that. Do you know that little bit at the very start? It's like a short movie in itself where the woman has lost a baby. That breaks me every time I see it.
Okay, I'm just asking
It's a
Mike,
silent-
Vicky, is that the squirrels up? Is that the one in
No,
the
it's the one
balloon?
with the house that goes up with balloons.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, did you never see it?
It is, it's the one with the squirrels.
Is there squirrels in that? Is there squirrels?
Okay, so when you've got dyslexia and you're slightly you've got slight autism, because I'm not going to, I haven't got huge.
I love that
your
one.
brain pattern moves very quickly. So we call them squirrels in our house.
Okay.
So we say, oh, there's a squirrel, because we be talking. Our conversation is not to do with what we started with. Okay, so I'll keep you safe now.
I love that movie. That's a lovely movie.
So that's your favourite movie. You've cheated me now.
I've cheated you now, yeah. That well, that would be my favourite animated movie. My favourite movie would be something fairly gory, probably like I love horror movies, honestly. Seven, love that movie. Or
That's the Brad
I love
Pitt one,
Brad
isn't it?
Pitt one, yeah, it's good.
yeah.
It's old, but it's
That's
good.
good.
Or what else? Pulp Fiction. I love those. No,
Yeah, Pulp Fiction's good. And your favourite swear word?
Fuck, obviously. As everybody has heard, I find it very hard to hold back. You should meet my father.
And when we met and we asked Vicky to do this, we were actually this was
Last year.
Yeah, and it was meant to be earlier on in the year, and things that didn't work out for us anyway. And I said, don't worry, Vicky. I was saying I'll call her Vicky
sick.
P.
Was I sick?
And you're Vicky P. So anyway, my Vicky, I shall say, came up with this event. I said, don't worry, we'll get you for this one. But there was one promise I made to Vicky when we asked her to come and talk, and that's her birthday's next week. So I promised her we would all sing her happy birthday.
Yeah.
So do you want to join in? Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday.